Good morning. My name is Private Robert Jones. I was a member of the British forces within the United Nations Command. The key feature that I will examine is the changing policies, strategies, and responses to the Cold War, and the area that I have researched from the focus of study is the Korean War. The Korean War was a surprise to us all. The North Korean People's Army unexpectedly launched a surprise attack on the South Koreans and pushed them far behind the 38th parallel after skirmishes beyond the border. I was sent to South Korea to assist in the British Commonwealth's 27th Infantry Brigade and joined the United Nations Command Forces on the 29th of August 1950. Our involvement in the Korean War was in response to United Nations Resolution 84, which, if I can recall correctly, stated the prompt and vigorous support of the United Nations to assist the Republic of Korea in defending itself against armed attack and thus to restore international peace and security in the area. This resulted in our nation and 15 others forming the United Nations Command alongside the South Korean forces. Our aim was to provide support against a communist takeover by the North Korean forces. At one point, our resistance team reached a peak strength of 932,964 troops. Furthermore, our response to the Korean War was also the consequence of President Truman's policy of containment. I remember watching one of his speeches broadcasted on TV the other day, where he said, "I believe that it must be the policy of the United States to support peoples who resist being enslaved by armed minorities or by outside pressure. I believe that we must free people to work out their own destiny in their own way." Truman's policy of containment applied to all of us around the world, not just America and South Korea. None of us wanted to be taken over by the commies. Everyone considered the spread of communism a significant global threat. It was especially a sensitive topic to us in Europe, as it reflected what was happening neighboring in Germany. The US couldn't directly engage with the USSR because of their loss in superiority in terms of a nuclear arsenal. Apparently it was something about the Soviets successfully testing the first nuclear bomb, only 4 years after the Yankees in 1945. I can't remember exactly. This meant the only option of warfare we could participate in with America was proxy warfare. The Korean War was the first major proxy war. We were supporting South Korea, whilst the Soviet Union and China supported North Korea. However, throughout our entire effort during the war, it was like the Soviet Union was waving at the US with an atomic bomb in her hand every time the US made a move. Truman's establishment of the Truman Doctrine, which outlined the policy of containment and the domino theory, heavily influenced our involvement in the war. As part of the United Nations Command, it was our job to prevent the fall of South Korea into communism, as according to the domino theory, if we were able to prevent one nation from falling into communism's hands, it would prevent surrounding nations from falling also. We could see that the USSR were attempting to turn countries around it into a sort of defense to protect the mainland, but we were unsure whether they would attempt to push further. This is why we had to intervene. After 3 long years of sporadic back-and-forth warfare and stalemates, the armistice was finally signed between the US, USSR, China, and North Korea. South Korea refused to sign the armistice as they were the ones that got invaded in the first place. We could finally go home and see our friends and families. The armistice resulted in the cessation of all hostilities in Korea, the establishment of the 38th parallel being the official border between North and South, and it ended the world's first engagement into the concept of limited war. For the first time in war, we weren't aiming for the surrender of the enemy, but just to protect South Korea. After the war, a demilitarized zone along the 38th parallel was created to mark our efforts and sacrifices during the war, also symbolizing the first indirect conflict between the communists and the Yankees, becoming an ideological battleground between East and West, communism and capitalism, if you will. As a result of our involvement in the Korean War, Britain and the other members of the UN showed their dedication to reinforcing and upholding the policy of containment. It established that we could fight a limited war in a foreign country where our ideologies clashed, and laid out the strategy that would be used in future conflicts. Most of all, it set the tone of the Cold War and the tensions between the two superpowers. Except we were all involved. This was a global scale conflict of interests, and sadly, I don't think it was going to end anytime soon. Sadly, the impact of the Korean War resulted in over 3 to 4 million civilian deaths. It doesn't matter what side you are on during a war, seeing that many deaths of innocent people was saddening. Imagine those people were your friends and family. Not only were there major civilian losses in Korea, but Korea's industry had been destroyed from the war. The Korean War definitely laid out the foundations for the type of warfare that would be used in future conflicts. Let's just hope either side doesn't end up resorting to the use of nuclear weapons.